He remembered the sky burning. Commander Cade wasn't a sentimental man. War had stripped that from him a long time ago. By the time you've buried your third squad under alien moons, all the speeches and flags mean nothing. You survive or you don't. That's it. And yet, as he sat in the scorched remains of the forward outpost on Thessar 9, watching the silent black sky, he couldn't stop thinking about the day the unknown ship first appeared. It wasn't human. He was sure of that. Humanity didn't build things that clean. No markings, no emissions, no transponder, no radiation bleed, not even a shimmer on the LiDAR. It just appeared, like a god blinking into reality. Size of a moon, blacker than space around it, shaped like something that had never touched a planet. The Empire's top scanners couldn't penetrate it. The AI war chief said it wasn't real, and then it vanished. Not warped, not jumped, vanished. Like it decided it had seen enough. 3 hours later, the capital planet burned. Not invaded, not attacked. Burned. From orbit, the feeds showed nothing. No energy signature, no ships, no weapons. One moment, the Imperial Sky Fortress gleamed with 2 billion lives. The next, just dust. The Empire's reaction was predictable. Arrogance followed by panic. They blamed human insurgents. They always did. Humanity had clawed their way into the Empire's fold a few decades ago, mostly through combat and attrition. We didn't bow, didn't assimilate like the others. So they kept us close, like a knife at their belt. And now, that knife was the only thing still breathing. Cade took a slow drag from the filterless stick clenched between his teeth. It was old Terran tobacco. Illegal in most sectors. Carcinogenic in everyone. He didn't care. His lungs were already shredded from 50 years of combat in vacuum armor. One more poison didn't matter. His comm chirped once, a short pulse. Code red. He stood slowly, the ache in his bones familiar. His armor hung on a rack, scarred and pitted, the once glossy black paint nearly stripped down to raw alloy. He stepped into it like second skin, feeling the servos wake and sink with his nerves. The HUD flared. A map popped up, then another notification. 6th Fleet, offline. Sector 7, lost contact. Command, silent. He blinked. That was 3 entire branches of the Empire's military. Gone. The unknown ship didn't return. No sound, no message, no warning. But one by one, the systems were going dark. Not just power, not just people. History itself was being erased. Empires could endure war. They couldn't survive being forgotten. Cade, a voice cracked through his internal comms. It was Darren, the last intel officer left on Thessar 9. They're saying Earth might be next. Cade spat out the half-burnt cigarette and crushed it under his heel. If it was going to hit Earth, it would have done it already. We're not the target. Then who is? Cade stared out at the starless sky. Whoever thought they were in charge. The Empire had ruled for 10,000 years. They believed themselves unbreakable. They subjugated over 200 sentient races, bent entire star systems to their law, erased rebellions with orbital bombardments, and yet one ship, one black void, had humiliated them. The last fleet response was a broadcast sent from Imperial High Admiral Kurthon before his cruiser blinked out of existence mid-sentence. Cade had replayed it 50 times. Unknown vessel appears to emit no aggression signal, no life form, no physical presence. Wait. The stars behind it are wrong. It's warping light. Oh gods, it's looking at us. It's... Silence. Then static. Cade hadn't stopped thinking about that last word. Looking. Not attacking. Not engaging, just observing. Like it wanted to see how empires died. He didn't care about the Empire, not really. It had enslaved humanity, branded them second-class soldiers, used them as shock troops. But if this thing was strong enough to erase a godlike civilization in silence, what hope did Earth have? The comm buzzed again. This time it was a ground ping, a single word. Descent. Cade grabbed his rifle, pulled the charging lever, and stepped into the open airlock. His boots crunched on blackened soil. He looked up. There were no stars, just a shape blotting out the sky. No engine, no sound. Just the feeling that something had arrived, something that had seen enough. Cade didn't flinch. "I don't know who you are," he muttered into the darkness, "but I've killed gods before." And then he raised his rifle. The air was too quiet. It wasn't the usual eerie silence of an empty battlefield. It was deeper than that, a silence that pressed on your skull like pressure in the deep ocean. Cade had felt fear before. He'd charged at biomechs that tore through armor like cloth. He'd waded through plasma fire and stepped over the mangled corpses of friends. But this silence? It was wrong. Even his armor, with all its stabilizers and climate buffers, hummed strangely under the black sky, like it was trying to scream, but had forgotten how. Cade's HUD was glitching. Not violently, not enough to be considered sabotage, just off. The time display blinked from 00001 to 00000 and back again, like it was stuck in a loop that didn't belong to any system clock. Coordinates spun in place. Atmospheric readings flatlined. No wind, no heat, no gravity flux. Nothing. Still, he marched forward, the rifle gripped tight in his gloved hands. The object, no, the shape, in the sky didn't move. It didn't descend. It didn't grow. It just sat there, blotting out existence, and he swore he could feel its attention. "Thessor Command to Ground Recon Unit 1, a voice came through. It was Darren again. "Is it still above you?" Cade stopped walking. "Not above, just there, existing." "Are you receiving any environmental changes?" "Negative. Feels like I'm walking through a dead man's dream." A pause. Then a sigh. "Cade, we just lost contact with Sector 3 and 4. Gone. Comms dead, power dead, AI links severed. No explosions, no movement, just empty." "That's 8 sectors." "No, it's 12 now. They just lost contact with Sectors 6 through 10. That's over 90 million people unaccounted for." Cade swallowed, his throat dry despite the internal hydration system pumping clean water every 15 minutes. 90 million, he whispered. "That's not war. That's extinction." He could hear Darren's breath on the other end. Shaky. Fast. "I pulled the last sensor drone feed from above Sector 7 before we lost it. I think you need to see this." Before Cade could respond, a visual override flickered into his HUD. The drone feed jittered, corrupted at first, but then it cleared. The footage was shaky, clearly damaged, but it showed the city beneath the observation tower. Cade narrowed his eyes. Everything looked normal for the first few seconds. People moved, cars hovered, lights glowed, and then the shadows deepened. No one noticed at first, not until the shadows started stretching unnaturally, like hands pulling away from their owners. Not like tricks of the light, not like camera distortion. The shadows moved independently. They twisted, slithered, and then they left their owners altogether, staining the ground like black oil. People froze, screamed, ran. But it didn't matter. The moment their shadows left, their bodies stopped existing. Not exploded, not turned to ash, just erased, as if someone hit backspace on the universe. The feed cut to black. Cade stood there, mouth tight, every part of his soldier's brain screaming that this couldn't be real, that it defied physics, that it defied logic. But deep down, something more primal whispered that this wasn't war at all. It was judgment. And whatever had made that ship, if it even was a ship, wasn't here to fight. It was here to end. "Cade," Darren's voice trembled. That footage was 60 seconds old. By now, Thesser 9 might be nothing but memory. Cade exhaled through his nose. You still there? Only because we're shielded underground. Our system's disconnected from the planetary grid. Full manual controls, old school, analog backups. Stay that way. Don't connect to anything. Don't let the AI activate. If this thing is erasing through data channels, it's not just hunting flesh. Copy. What are you going to do? Cade looked back up at the black void hanging above him. Something stupid. Without another word, he turned and started marching toward the last known epicenter, the place where the shadows had begun to stretch. He moved across crumbled streets, scorched pavement, twisted metal. The city was silent. No bodies, no blood, just absence. He passed playgrounds with swings still moving, park benches with half-eaten food resting on them, cars parked in lanes, engines still humming, no drivers in sight. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a museum of disappearance. Half an hour later, he reached the exact spot. It was a square. Circular fountain in the middle, long since dry, with crumbling marble and ornamental alien plants still trying to bloom. Cade stepped onto the fountain's edge and turned a slow circle. Nothing. He was about to curse when his boots shifted, just slightly. A vibration passed up his leg, light but noticeable. He dropped to one knee, pressed his gloved hand against the cracked tiles, and felt it again. A pulse. Not seismic, not mechanical, rhythmic. A heartbeat? He quickly unlatched a handheld scanner from his belt, one of the old Terran models that worked without network reliance. No uplinks, just raw sensors. He activated it. At first it read empty, but then, slowly, something changed. Not a signal, a pattern. There, in the surrounding walls, beneath the pavement, woven into the very architecture, a lattice. Geometric shapes, circles within circles, fractal lines forming impossible spirals. These weren't designed by the Empire. These were older. Much older. He turned on the scanner's overlay. The spirals pulsed once, twice, then the scanner shut off. Dead. No warning. Just off. Cade stood up slowly. Darren, you copy? No response. Darren. Still nothing. He reached for the emergency flare, lit it. Red smoke hissed out. Primitive. Reliable. Above him the sky shimmered. The shape had changed. No longer just a black void. It had become translucent, semi-visible, like staring at a massive glacier through a storm. He saw angles that didn't belong in 3 dimensions, structures that bent inward and out at the same time. It wasn't built, it was grown, or evolved. And in the center of it, movement. Cade zoomed in with his visor. Something stood there, tall, humanoid in shape, but not in motion. No armor, no clothes, just a silhouette of light moving like smoke. It didn't have eyes, but it was looking at him. Cade felt his chest tighten. His armor compressed slightly, detecting a rise in blood pressure and internal stress levels. Not yet, he muttered. Don't panic. He raised his rifle, not in defense, but in defiance. He was a man. He was a soldier. And no matter how ancient or alien this thing was, it had come to a planet where humans still breathed. Why are you here? He growled, unsure if he expected an answer. And then the thing moved. Not physically, but the space around it twisted. The city darkened, as if time itself dimmed. And Cade heard a voice, not in his ears, but behind his thoughts. Witness. The word echoed like thunder inside his skull. His knees buckled. He dropped, face slamming into the stone. Blood ran from his nose. The word didn't speak to him. It rewrote him. Images poured into his mind. Planets burning, empires collapsing, gods screaming, races wiped out in silence, and one constant in all of it. The ship. It had no name. It didn't come from a place. It was called when civilizations reached their peak, when pride replaced purpose, when power turned inward. It was summoned by hubris, like a cosmic reaper drawn to arrogance. Cade screamed and clutched his head. The voice returned. They built eternity on the bones of the weak. They claimed divinity through domination. They erased. We erase them. We. Cade coughed. Blood dripped from his lips. Who are you? The sky flickered. The shape began to fold back in on itself. The end and the beginning. Cade forced himself up on shaking arms. Why spare us? Why not finish it? There was silence. Then, because you remember pain, and you bleed honestly. The light vanished. The sky cleared. And just like that, it was gone. Darren's voice came back, sputtering through static. Cade, are you still alive? Cade collapsed backward, staring at the stars above. Yeah, he whispered, but the Empire's dead. The stars had never looked that sharp before. Commander Cade lay motionless on the cracked tiles of the dead plaza, staring up at the clear sky. The unknown ship was gone, vanished the same way it arrived. No sound, no flash, no trace. But something inside him had changed. Not mentally, not spiritually, physically. His neural link built into the base of his spine was shorting in and out. The HUD across his visor kept resetting itself. Oxygen flow inside the helmet dipped, surged, then normalized. He tore it off with a sharp hiss and gulped the cold alien air. It stung, sharp and metallic, like he'd just inhaled battery acid and regret. His head pounded with what felt like old memories and new nightmares stitched together. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat from that ship's silent scream. The voice still echoed faintly, somewhere behind his consciousness. Because you bleed honestly. He didn't know what that meant. But he knew this. The Empire was over. Still breathing, Cade? Darren's voice broke through the static again. It sounded weaker now, like he was calling from another galaxy. Cade winced, pushing himself up with stiff arms. Barely. What's your status? We've gone dark, fully analog. No uplinks, no AI, no contact with other sectors. We're getting short-range distress pings, but most are just bursts. Half-finished messages, corrupted signals. People are disappearing mid-sentence, like the data of them is being wiped as they speak. Cade looked around the square. It was still empty, still unnaturally clean, as if the people who had once walked there had never been born. He clenched his jaw. I saw it. The thing. Whatever it was. It spoke to me. You mean, like, telepathy? Number like being rewritten. It forced a memory into me. Or maybe it was never a memory at all. Maybe it was a warning. Darren was quiet for a long moment. Then, what did it want? Cade stood, cracked his neck. His back screamed in protest. It didn't want anything, he said slowly. It came to finish something. Something it's done before. A low hum came through the comms. Not from Darren. Not from anywhere known. Then silence. Cade froze. Darren, you still with me? The silence stretched. Then a voice, barely audible. Not Darren. It was an old voice. Male, human, strained. This is Commander Alric West, Earth Defense Council. If you're receiving this, you're one of the last... It's not a weapon, not a ship, it's a consequence. The feed cut out again, then static. Cade's eyes narrowed. He knew that name, Alric West, a name that hadn't been spoken aloud in over 3 decades, one of the first human generals to ever serve in the Empire's High Council. He vanished during the Vorn rebellions, presumed dead in a sabotage incident deep in Sector 2. But if this message was real, he was alive, or had been. A consequence. That word stuck in Cade's brain like a splinter. He began walking, away from the plaza, back towards the old comm tower, the one Darren had fortified with analog systems and thick EM shielding. Each step crunched over broken glass and scorched metal, but still, no bodies, not even bones, like they'd been scrubbed out of time. "Cade," Darren's voice returned, this time tighter. "You need to get back here, now." "Why? What happened?" "We just decoded an automated substream. Old Terran, buried under the standard Empire distress protocol. Took me half an hour to strip the encryption." "From who?" "It's signed Project Ashwinter. Ring any bells?" Cade stopped walking. His pulse spiked. That name hadn't been spoken in nearly 20 years. It was buried so deep under Empire intelligence layers that even whispering it near a terminal used to trigger review. But he remembered it. Ashwinter wasn't a project. It was a punishment. The last time Earth had tried to rebel outright, the Empire responded by launching Ashwinter, an initiative that aimed to reduce entire colonies to psychological null zones, not through bombs or viruses, but through absence. "Send me the file," Cade muttered. A blink later, it hit his visor. "Secure file. Ashwinter Prime. Do not decrypt in linked network. Subject, Observation Class Entity Designation, null form. Date, 76 years prior. Entity appears not to move through space, but through memory layers. Contact initiates timeline degradation. Primary trait, unrecordable observation. A civilization becomes aware of it and begins to forget itself. Target civilizations are not destroyed through violence, but erased through recursive non-existence. Initial traces date back millennia. Cultures report similar descriptions. A black void, a silent watcher, arrival followed by vanishing, then collapse of societal memory. Artifact records break. Family trees sever. Collective identity fades. In one case, a species reportedly woke up in ruins with no recollection of ever being an empire. It does not kill. It unhappens. Note: Earth was flagged as incompatible with null-form sequence due to excessive emotional fragmentation and generational trauma markers. Status: terminated under order of Imperial decree. Do not engage. Cade's mouth was dry. "We were immune," he whispered. Darren's voice returned. "What? Earth. Humans. We were immune to it. Not because we're strong, not because we're smart, because we're too broken." "Come again?" Cade clenched his fists. "It doesn't erase by force. It erases by detachment, by making people forget what they were. It thrives on unity, on order, on systems that believe in their own permanence. That's why the Empire crumbled." He turned slowly, scanning the horizon. The cities, the mountains, the ruins of something far bigger than just buildings. "But humans," he continued, "we've never agreed on anything. We've fought each other more than any alien race ever could. We survive not because we remember, but because we can't forget. Our pain is our anchor, our scars. They hold us together." Darren was silent. Then, in a softer voice, "Then why are we still here, Cade?" Cade looked back at the empty plaza. "Because this thing doesn't destroy survivors," he said. "It uses them." The voice had said it clearly. "Because you bleed honestly." That wasn't mercy. That was recognition. Cade began to run now. Full sprint. Past melted towers, past empty homes. Every step hammered into the dead world around him until he reached the steel doors of the comm tower and slammed a fist on the manual unlock panel. The doors hissed open and Darren stood there, pale, sweating, eyes bloodshot. "You saw it too," Cade muttered. Darren nodded slowly. "Not like you did. But I had a dream. No, a memory that doesn't belong to me. My mother died when I was 8. Now I remember her dying twice, once on Earth, once in a city I've never been to." "They're bleeding history into us," Cade said. Or maybe stitching other histories through us. He stepped inside and slammed the doors shut. The interior was dark, covered in cables, manual switches, and paper logs, the kind of analog hell that only old Terran bases had ever loved. "So now what?" Darren asked, gripping the back of a chair. "Do we hide? Wait for it to pass?" Cade didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the room, to an old tactical display. It still showed the star map of Empire space. Dozens of sectors, hundreds of systems, most blinking red, a few already blacked out. "We don't hide," he said at last. "We don't wait." He turned, eyes hard. "We find out what this thing wants, and we give it something it's never had before." Darren frowned. "Which is?" Cade picked up a rusted Earth defense beacon from the storage rack, slapped in a fusion cell. The lights flickered to life. A fight. It was strange, preparing for war against something you couldn't aim at. Cade had fought for 50 years, against insectoid swarms, artificial rebellions, rogue AI cults, void-born parasites. Everything the galaxy could throw at a man, it had thrown. And every time he'd stood up again, bleeding and bitter, but breathing. But now? Now he was preparing to fight something that didn't exist in the traditional sense. The void entity, the null form, as Project Ashwinter called it, wasn't a threat that could be outgunned or outflanked. It didn't use soldiers, didn't burn cities. It simply observed, and by doing so, unwrote what it saw. And somehow Earth had survived that gaze. Darren stood behind Cade, watching silently as he loaded a pulse core into the old Terran beacon. The room smelled of ozone and burning plastic, a byproduct of keeping analog systems alive in a world built for synthetic control. Every screen in the comm tower was dead except one, a flickering 3D map of known space, filled with red blinking sectors, showing the collapse of the Empire in real time. Sector 14, gone. Sector 3, silent. Sector 19, broadcasting gibberish, coordinates that led nowhere, emergency codes from species long extinct. Cade stabbed a wire into the map's core socket, causing the image to flicker, then expand. "Here," he muttered, pointing. Darren leaned in. "What is that?" "Old Earth defense outpost. Pre-Empire. Deep in neutral space, just past the edge of the Ura dust line. Was used for research on Ashwinter before the Empire shut it down. Most don't even know it still exists." "You think they knew more than what was in the report?" "I'd bet blood on it." Darren frowned. "And you think someone's still alive there?" "No," Cade said grimly. "But something might be. Logs, data, warnings we never listened to. And if we're going to fight this thing, I want to know exactly what triggered it." Darren leaned against the table, rubbing his temples. "Do you think we triggered it?" Cade didn't answer right away. His silence was enough. The Empire's arrogance had spanned millennia. They thought their unity was divine. Thought control was progress. They saw humans as chaotic, fragmented, flawed. But maybe that flaw had been the reason the Empire fell, and Earth stood. He turned toward the launch bay inside the tower. Dust-coated jumpsuits, rusted exopacks, a single short-range cruiser still functional under manual controls. It had no AI, no hyperlink. It was like flying blind with a brick strapped to a nuke. But it would do. "We take the ship," Cade said. "We head to the Ashwinter outpost. We find out what this thing really is, or at least what it wants. And then—" "What?" Darren asked. "We beg it to spare us?" "No," Cade said, voice low and cold. "We find a way to hurt it." Darren laughed once, bitter. "You're out of your mind." Cade looked over. "That's why I'm still alive." They launched at dawn, or what passed for dawn on Thesser 9. The cruiser stuttered at first, like it hadn't been awake in decades, But eventually the engines held. The skies were empty. No patrols, no Empire drones. Just silence. They punched through atmosphere and into space within an hour. The moment they hit orbit, Darren called out, "Visual on debris field. Massive!" Cade stepped to the viewport. Outside, floating above Thessar 9, was what remained of the 7th Imperial Armada. Or at least what used to be it. Hundreds of ships, from corvettes to supercarriers, all frozen in disarray, not destroyed, not burned, just abandoned. Lights still blinking, engines still primed, no bodies. Cade stared in silence. It didn't even consider them worth erasing. Darren nodded grimly, like swatting flies and forgetting they existed. They passed the debris without interference, then punched their route manually through uncharted space. It would take them 3 days on the cruiser's sublight engines, an eternity in a galaxy used to warp travel. But speed meant exposure, and Cade didn't want to be seen. The first night, Cade didn't sleep. He sat near the nav console, drinking stale water, staring at old holographs pulled from the ship's archive. Pre-Empire Earth. Images of smoking cities, protests, war, ruins and revolutions. And yet through all the pain, something constant, a face in every crowd. Defiance, rage, identity. Humans didn't forget who they were, even when they wanted to. That's what made them dangerous. The second night, Darren joined him. "You ever wonder," he asked, "if this is what we were always heading toward?" Cade looked over. "What do you mean?" Darren leaned back. "I mean, this thing, this null form, it's not a villain. It's not an invader. It's a force. It shows up when civilizations get too big, too perfect, when they lose the reason they started building in the first place." Cade didn't respond. Darren went on, voice quieter now. "Maybe this is how the universe balances itself. Maybe there's no peace to be found in unity, only erasure." Cade tapped the side of his helmet. "Then let it come. I'm not looking for peace. I'm looking for a reason to pull the trigger." They arrived at the Ashwinter outpost on the 3rd day. It was a jagged rock orbiting a dead sun. No atmosphere, no movement, just an old black station bolted to the crust like a scar. It had no beacon, no lights. But when their ship approached, an old Earth command signal blinked green. Recognition code accepted. "Son of a bitch," Cade muttered. "They never shut it down." They docked, entered through the outer ring. No security, no defenses, just dust and silence and the creaking groan of something ancient still trying to live. Inside, it was colder than space. Generators were offline. Only one hallway had emergency power. They followed it. At the end, behind 2 rusted bulkheads, they found it. A man. Or what had once been one. He was sitting in a chair, skin mummified, bones frozen in place. A tattered Earth defense uniform hung from his frame. His face was shriveled, mouth open, eyes long dried out. But in his lap, clutched in bony hands, was a drive. Darren stepped forward and took it. "No," Cade said. "Let me." He pried the drive loose. It was warm, warm. "That shouldn't be possible," Darren muttered. "Power's dead." Cade connected it to a handheld reader. A hologram blinked to life. Alric West, younger, fierce, voice steady. "If you're watching this, Earth still stands. That means you've seen the ship, and you're asking the same question I asked 50 years ago. What is it?" "It's not one thing. It's the collective echo of 1,000 dead civilizations. They didn't die. They were consumed by their own reflection. This entity doesn't destroy, it mirrors. And when a species stares into that mirror long enough, it forgets how it started. They forget hunger, pain, grit. They forget how to bleed. That's when the null form arrives, to finish what pride began. But humans? We never forget pain. We build homes out of trauma. We stitch our history from ashes. That's why we survive, not because we're strong, but because we're ugly enough to remember." Cade stared at the flickering image. Alric was speaking directly into the soul of what humanity was. "You want to kill it? You can't, but you can fight it. You can remind the galaxy what pain looks like, what blood feels like. You carry that with you. That's your gift. That's your weapon. You don't beat the void by hiding from it. You face it, and you bleed honestly." The feed cut. Silence. Cade exhaled, chest tight. "We don't run," he said. Darren nodded slowly. "We show it we still remember." Cade turned back toward the ship. "Prep the broadcast array. We're going live." "Going live to what?" Cade's eyes burned with fire. "To everything. What's left of the Empire? Dead systems, scattered humans, the whole galaxy." "And say what?" He stopped in the doorway. "We say, the void came for us, and we're still here." The broadcast array groaned like an old god being forced out of sleep. Cade stood in the control chamber of the Ashwinter outpost, staring at panels that hadn't seen light in over 50 years. Darren worked beside him, fingers flying across a cracked keyboard, coaxing ancient Terran tech back to life without alerting whatever ghost systems the Empire might have left behind. No uplinks, no AI, no synthetic stabilizers, just two men and a dying signal line that might still carry a voice across the stars. "This signal's not going to last more than a few minutes," Darren muttered. "The fusion battery's bleeding out. Maybe one jump relay before it fries." "That's enough," Cade said, tightening the straps of his ragged armor. "We just need one ear." "One ear's not going to stop what's coming." Cade looked up, eyes hard. "It's not about stopping it, it's about challenging it." He stepped forward and flipped the switch on the recording mic. A red light blinked. "Live." His voice was coarse at first, rusty from hours of silence and recycled air, but it carried weight, it carried truth. "This is Commander Cade Mercer of the Earthborn Shock Legion," he said low and steady. "If you're hearing this, you're either hiding, dying, or you're like me, too damn stubborn to quit." He paused. No script, no plan, just the words crawling up from deep inside his bones. "You've seen the black sky. You've watched cities disappear. You've felt the world forget itself while you're still standing in it. I know. I've been there, and now you want answers. You want to know what the hell that ship was, why it looked at us and blinked us out like we were smudges on glass." He leaned closer, the static crackling around his words. "It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a fleet. It was a reckoning, a consequence for pretending we were gods." The red light blinked faster. "Time running out." "But here's the thing," he said, voice rising. "It didn't finish the job. It blinked and we were still here. Earth still breathes. Humans still bleed. And that thing? That void? That null form? It doesn't know what to do with that." Cade slammed his fist down on the table, rattling the mic. "Because we don't forget. We don't dissolve into order and peace. We remember every betrayal, every lost name, every scar etched into our skin. We were never meant to be part of the Empire. We were the thorn they tolerated, not the jewel they prized. But now?" He paused, letting the air settle like ash. "Now we're all that's left." Darren glanced up, nodding once. Cade leaned in again. "If you're a soldier, find a weapon. If you're a tech, find a signal. If you're breathing, then damn it, fight. I don't care if the enemy is made of silence and shadow. I don't care if it wipes out our names. It looked at us and moved on. That means we matter. That means we're the problem." A final beep echoed. Signal fading. "Let's make sure it remembers why." The mic went dead. The red light stopped blinking. Silence returned. Cade stepped back and exhaled. The whole outpost seemed to creak in approval or warning. Darren stood slowly. You think anyone heard it?" Cade didn't answer. He stared at the floor, eyes scanning lines of cracked tile, as if listening for something older than sound. "Yeah," he said at last. "I think something did." They left the broadcast room and sealed it behind them. There was no second transmission, no backup signal. Either that one message lit a spark across the surviving corners of the galaxy, or it vanished like everything else. But something had changed. The moment they stepped back aboard the cruiser, the sky outside shifted. Cade?" Darren said, pointing to the viewport. "That's not normal." Above the dead sun, where nothing should have been, the stars began to flicker. Not like distant lights, but like pixels on a broken screen. One by one, constellations twisted. The sky warped. The shape had returned. Not directly above them, not on the planet, but just beyond perception. Like it was pacing. "I think we got its attention," Darren whispered. Cade grabbed the control stick. "Then let's make sure we hold it." They fired the engines and left the outpost behind. Fast, hard, straight toward open space. Not back to Thesser 9, not to Earth. Cade had something else in mind. "What are you doing?" Darren asked. "Heading to a graveyard." He pulled up old coordinates, hidden Earthborn sanctums, pre-Empire war zones long since declared off-limits. The place where rebellion bled into legend. A place where human soldiers had been left to rot because their loyalty wasn't to the Council, but to each other. Valkyr's Rim. It was a hell world orbiting a decaying star. No resources, no life. Just a cluster of broken ships and buried secrets. But it was also the last known location of the Cradle. A myth among old Terran ranks. The Cradle wasn't a weapon. It was a code vault. A black box storing the darkest fragments of humanity's war record. Strategies banned by the Empire, biological triggers, fear viruses, memory collapse protocols, all the things that made humanity too volatile to fully trust. The kind of things that might rattle a god. "We're going to awaken something that was never meant to be touched," Darren said. Cade adjusted course. "Good." 3 days later, they dropped out of sublight just above the rim. The system was dead. Silent, but the graveyard was still there. Thousands of ships scattered like bones in orbit, all fused together by time and radiation. No lights, no movement. But deep inside the field, one signal pulsed. The Cradle. They slipped through the wreckage, scraping hulls, bouncing off debris. Finally, they reached a long, dead dreadnought split down the middle. Inside it, hidden beneath armor and melted steel, was a single black cube. The Cradle. Darren stared at it. "Do we even know how to open it?" Cade pulled out the drive from Ashwinter. "No," he said, "but I know who does." He inserted the drive into the cube's interface. It pulsed red. A low hum began to build in the chamber, vibrating through their boots. Then a voice spoke. "Authorization. Earthborn clearance Alpha Tau 7. Memory trigger unlocked. Defense code. Black Sun Initiative." Darren took a step back. "Oh hell, that's real." Cade didn't blink. "It's all real now." The cube unfolded. Inside it were dozens of small chips, each encoded with history the Empire had tried to erase, each one a nightmare in data form. One of them pulsed with blue light. Cade picked it up. Its label was burned, but he didn't need to read it. He could feel what it was. Fear. Not information, not logic, not tactics. A raw, weaponized emotion designed to trigger existential dread in any species it touched. Made in the first days of Earth's war with the machine gods of the Arctari Belt. The last time humanity had faced something that didn't understand pain, and made it understand anyway. He looked at Darren. "This thing wants memory," he said. "Let's give it the worst of ours." "You're going to upload that into the void?" "No," Cade said. "I'm going to carry it into its shadow, and let it look into me." The ship shook. The lights flickered. Outside, the stars bent. The shape had arrived. Closer now. Watching. Waiting. Cade clenched the chip in his fist and walked to the viewport. "Come on then," he muttered. "Let's see if gods can be afraid." The stars had stopped moving. From the cockpit of the stolen cruiser, Cade watched as the galaxy seemed to pause. No spin, no drift, no pull. Time itself felt like it had stepped out of the room and closed the door behind it. The void had arrived. It didn't scream into orbit. It didn't roar. It simply was, hanging above Valkyr's rim like a second sky, larger than anything natural, its surface pulsing with inverted light. It wasn't black. Black was absence. This was inversion, like it rejected the idea of color, of matter, of presence itself. And yet it saw him. He felt it again, that unbearable awareness pressing into his chest, a gaze so immense it crushed everything you thought was real. Darren stood beside him, pale and shaking. "It's here." Cade didn't reply, he just stared. In his hand was the chip, fear, encoded in raw, emotional data, more than just terror. This wasn't a weapon that burned or cut. This was the scream of a mother who lost her child to an orbital strike. The desperation of a soldier holding his intestines in after a pulse bomb went off. The silence of a dying child who knew no one would come. This was the worst of humanity, wrapped in memory, soaked in history, preserved as a virus. He hadn't loaded it yet. Once he did, the broadcast would reach every nearby receptive signal, the entity included. If it could be reached, if it even had something like memory. "Cade," Darren said again, now clutching the side of the console. "If we do this, we don't know what it'll do. It could erase this entire sector in a blink." Cade turned, eyes bloodshot, voice low. "And if we don't? It erases everything slowly, thoughtfully, like we never mattered." He slotted the chip into the interface. The ship's systems flickered, then rebooted in silent mode. Emotions, not logic, flowing through the circuits. Earth's darkest invention had never been authorized for use, even during the final rebellions. That had changed. The air grew thick, like the ship itself knew what it was carrying. "Cade." Darren backed away, voice dry. "It's reacting." The shape outside twisted. The angles broke. One corner of the void folded inward, exposing something underneath. Not physical, not visible in the traditional sense, but alive. It looked like a wound in space, a wound that was bleeding memory. And in that instant, Cade saw too much. Thousands of civilizations blinking out, not through war, but through abandonment. Cities with no names, planets where no child was ever born, empires that never learned from pain. The void didn't kill them. It made them forget why to exist at all. That's what the null form was. A mirror. And civilizations that loved their own reflection too much. They dissolved into it. But humanity had never loved itself. It fought, it fractured, it hated. It remembered every sin, and Cade was about to weaponize that hatred. He pressed the final sequence. The chip activated. A silent signal pulsed, carrying not data, not words, but pain. He didn't transmit it through words. He broadcast himself. The chip flooded his neural link. His spine arched. Every old wound lit up like it was fresh. He saw old battles again, his friends screaming beside him in the trenches of Eridus 7, the day he watched an entire civilian convoy get melted by the Empire for loyalty confusion, the time he shot a child because she'd been rigged with proximity mines by a dying resistance group. And then, his worst moment, His brother, captured, tortured, reprogrammed by Imperial Black Ops. Cade had to kill him with a knife. No gun, no mercy. The chip relived it all, through him, and sent that agony screaming into the void. The sky rippled. The ship shook. "Cade!" Darren screamed, grabbing him as he convulsed. "Kill the signal!" But Cade didn't stop. The pain was flowing now, not out of him, but into the thing above. The shape in the sky began to buckle. Its geometry wavered. And for the first time, Cade heard something new. A sound. Not speech, not data, a moan. Deep, low, as if space itself had been stabbed and didn't understand what pain was. The wound in the sky opened wider. Cade collapsed to his knees, nose bleeding, jaw clenched. He was barely conscious when he saw it. A figure stepping out of the void. Not a machine, not a god, something that looked almost human, but cracked, stretched, warped by time. It had no face, just a skull of mirrored glass, its surface rippling with every scream Cade had ever buried. It stepped onto the hull of their ship, ignoring physics, ignoring matter. It came for him. Darren backed away in raw panic, shouting into the void, firing his pistol in blind instinct. The shots passed through the creature like mist. It walked to the viewport, pressed a mirrored palm against it, and time stopped. Literally, the lights froze. Darren's body hung mid-motion, suspended like a photograph. Only Cade could move. And in his mind, a voice, not like before, raw, confused. "Why do you scream?" Cade forced himself to stand. He staggered towards the viewport, face inches from the figure's reflection. "Because I remember." "They did not. I'm not them. You carry grief. I carry humanity." The figure tilted its head, glass face flickering with thousands of faces, flickering like broken channels. "You survive through agony." Cade pressed his bloody hand to the viewport in return. "That's what makes us real." The creature's reflection twisted again. Now it showed Cade himself, as a boy, then as a soldier, then as a man covered in blood, then as nothing. The mirrored image faded. "You hurt me." Cade grinned, blood on his teeth. "Good." The creature stepped back. Time resumed. Darren collapsed, gasping. The lights blinked. The sky shifted. The wound closed. The shape retreated. Not vanished, just pulled away. For the first time in known history, the null form withdrew. Not because it was beaten, but because it had felt something it never had before. Pain. Cade collapsed beside the console. Darren dragged himself toward him. "You alive?" he gasped. Cade nodded weakly. "More than ever." "What? What just happened?" Cade stared out the window. It saw us, really saw us, and for the first time, it didn't know what to do. Darren leaned against the wall, staring at the stars returning to normal. "So, what now?" Cade looked at the cradle's still glowing chip. "Now we make sure it never forgets us." The signal hit the stars like a pulse of raw nerve. In the days after Cade's broadcast and the confrontation with the null form, something began to stir across the remnants of the Empire. Not immediately, not loudly, but deeply, like a great heart starting to beat again after a long, cold stillness. In forgotten bunkers, on derelict warships, in quiet corners of dead worlds where human outposts had long since gone silent, the message replayed. "If you're breathing, then damn it, fight." For the first time in a generation, humans started answering. It began with flickers. A rogue transmission from the Ferris Belt, where Earthborn miners had hidden from the Empire's forced relocations decades ago. Then a garbled voice in the decaying orbit of the Helios Gate, a coded reply from the depths of Venera 3's collapsed underground rail lines, where deserters had become myth. The Empire had called them fractured, disloyal, dangerous. Now those same forgotten fighters were waking up, remembering who they were and who had made them disappear. They didn't believe in unity. They believed in vengeance, and Cade had given them a reason to remember. Inside the cruiser, patched into the cradle's manual systems, Darren tracked the signals one by one. 17 confirmed pings, he said, tapping the crude console. Old Earthborn tags. Some of them. Cade, some of these are from legions that were wiped out during the Empire's pacification campaigns, supposedly extinct. Cade sat hunched near the viewport, still pale from the overload. His body hadn't recovered from the confrontation with the Null form. The pain broadcast had aged him 10 years in minutes. His eyes were sunken, his movements stiff. But his mind was sharper than ever. They went dark because the Empire erased their history, he muttered. Not because they died. We're not easy to kill. Darren nodded. These people are angry. Good, Cade said. We're going to need that. Outside, the Rim graveyard remained still. The void hadn't returned. Not yet. But Cade could feel it watching, not just hovering anymore, studying. The chip was still embedded in the ship's systems. Not broadcasting anymore, but still active, still warm. Like it had imprinted itself on the ship's core, changing something subtle in the way the sensors read the space around them. Cade had touched the mind of the Null form, and it had touched his. He felt things now he shouldn't, heard echoes, flashes, moments not his own, distant cries, civilizations dying in silence, and something deeper. Curiosity. He knew it now. The void wasn't just a destroyer, it was a learner. It had never been hurt before, never been shown real fear. Not the kind that came from emotion, but from memory. And now it was adapting. What if this backfires? Darren asked quietly. What if all we've done is teach it how to erase us better? Cade stood slowly. Every joint creaked. Then we make it regret learning. The console pinged again. Darren glanced down. New signal, stronger. This one's different. Cade stepped over, scanning the output. A sharp, rhythmic code. It wasn't military, it was ritual. A blood flag, used only once in Terran history, by survivors of the Rainscar massacre, when an entire battalion was abandoned by the Empire and fought off a biological siege for 6 years alone. They'd encoded their last message in a blood flag, one final scream into the void. This signal matched that structure. Play it, Cade said. The transmission began, distorted but clear. This is Lieutenant Ren Varro, Earthborn Division 13. We received your message. Sector 24 is lost. Half our people don't remember where they were born. The other half don't care. But we do. We remember pain. We remember what it cost to be forgotten. A pause. You bled honestly. We will too. Another ping followed seconds later, then another, and another. The console filled with call signs, squads that didn't exist in the Empire's history books, names that had been stricken from records, soldiers who weren't supposed to remember who they were, and they were all saying the same thing. We remember. Darren sat down slowly, exhaling. You started a war. Cade stared at the blinking console, jaw tight. Number I resurrected one. He turned towards the nav system. Prep jump coordinates. Earth. Darren's head snapped up. Are you insane? We need to get there before the Null form does. The Empire buried more than just our history on that planet. They buried weapons, knowledge, data too dangerous to keep accessible. You think Earth will still be standing after this? If it's not, it's still home. He didn't wait for debate. He locked in coordinates. As the ship prepped for jump, something strange happened. Every system went dark. Not violently, just like a breath being held. Darren stood. Cade? Then the console flickered. A single message appeared on screen. Not from any relay, not from any faction. Just a line of text that should have been impossible. I saw you. Cade stared. The ship vibrated. Not physically, internally. He could feel the null form again. Not in space, but in his mind. Not attacking, not deleting, mimicking. It's trying to think like us, he whispered. Darren stepped back. Then we've infected it. No, Cade said darkly. We've awakened it. The ship's systems returned to life. Jump drive lit up. They launched. The stars bent. The rim graveyard vanished. And in the deep, somewhere beyond light, the void shifted. Inside its impossible geometry, it held a new shape now. A memory. A shape that looked like Cade. They dropped out of sublight 2 systems short of Earth. Not by choice. Something dragged them out. No alarms, no impact. Just a sudden stop. Cade grabbed the control stick. Report? Darren stared at the external feed. Cade, this is bad. Outside, the stars were gone. Not covered. Gone. In their place, reflections. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of Cade's last broadcast playing across space, like echoes on mirrors, each one slightly different. In one, Cade screamed. In another, he wept. In another, he bled from the eyes as he raised his rifle. The void was replaying him, studying his rage, learning his pain, feeding on it, and shaping it. Cade, Darren said, voice cracking. It's not trying to erase us anymore, it's trying to become us. Cade felt cold all over. He stepped to the window. One of the mirrored echoes turned its head and looked directly at him, not through the screen. At him, and it smiled. Cade whispered, "It learned fear." Darren replied, voice barely audible, "And now it wants to know what comes after." Cade stared into his own face, reflected across the void, warped and multiplied, replaying like a corrupted memory loop in a broken mind. Each version of him, each echo, played out something different. One screamed in helpless fury, rifle shaking in his hands. One dropped to his knees, sobbing with blood dripping from his eyes. One stood, calm and grim, whispering words Cade could no longer hear, but knew by heart. And one just smiled. The same crooked, defiant grin Cade wore when he'd first challenged the void. It wasn't just mirroring him. It was learning to feel him. "What is this?" Darren whispered, transfixed by the impossible theater outside their viewport. "This isn't a ship. This isn't war. It's an infection of thought." "No," Cade muttered, voice hard. "It's imitation. Pure mimicry. The thing doesn't destroy like we do, it unbuilds. But now it's realized the one thing we have that it doesn't." He turned to Darren. Consequence. The void hadn't killed civilizations by burning them. It had watched them erase themselves, bored of repetition, weary of their own perfection. It reflected their godlike pride back at them, let them see the futility in eternal stability, then waited for the rest to collapse. But humanity had always been different. We fought because we were broken. We survived because we refused to forget our wounds. And now the void wanted that too. The flickering shapes outside began to converge, bleeding into one larger mass. A figure began to form, taller than any known species, broad-shouldered, long-limbed, the outline of a soldier. A man. But not quite. Its face shifted. Not flesh, not metal, something in between, and its mouth never moved, but Cade still heard it inside his skull. "I understand now." Darren gripped the console. "It's using your memories to build identity." Cade nodded, slow and steady. "It's becoming something else. Fear is not weakness. Pain is not decay. They are structure." The figure stepped forward across the stars. No movement. Just presence. "You endured. I did not account for memory that resists deletion." Cade stepped to the viewport, face inches from the swirling void. Because we wear our pain, every day. You made us remember it louder. The figure flickered, glitching between Cade's image and something new. A face that wasn't his, but could have been. The first version of something trying to be human. I want to understand more. That's not how this works, Cade said. Show me. Let me feel everything. No. The void paused. You fear what I may become. Cade stepped away from the viewport. No, he said. I fear what I might become if I let you in. The ship shook. Suddenly, hundreds of signals burst across the system. Darren turned, eyes wide. Cade, every Earthborn signal just lit up. They heard us. They're coming. He looked at the radar. Dozens of ships, small and crude, patched together from ruins, relics of Earth's abandoned children. None of them carried fleet AI. None of them had wormhole tech. These were hand-forged weapons of desperation, and they were charging in. To die, maybe, but to die loudly. They're broadcasting something, Darren said, tapping a feed. Old Earthborn war code, a single line. He played it aloud. It echoed inside the cabin like thunder in a tomb. You looked into us. Now look into our wrath. Cade closed his eyes and smiled. The void, in response, shifted again. Its figure opened its arms, not in threat, in invitation. Then give it to me. Darren turned to Cade. We can overload the chip, feed the Cradle's entire fear archive into it, everything the Empire tried to forget, every rebellion, atrocity, genocide. If this thing wants pain, let's drown it. Cade nodded. Do it. The Cradle began to hum. One by one, the data wafers activated, history uncoiled, screams encoded in soundless files, blood-written memories, the whispered last words of soldiers who died abandoned in vacuum, all of it pumped into the chip. The ship groaned under the weight of it, hull shaking, systems dimming. Cade stepped into the central core, and once again he broadcast himself. Not just one moment this time, all of it. He opened the floodgates of human suffering. His spine arched, vision blurred. But he didn't scream. He remembered. He remembered the child he couldn't save, the men he left behind, the orders he followed that cost a city. He remembered being called subhuman by the Empire for being born on Earth. And he pushed it out, into the sky, into the thing that wanted to become like them. The void figure convulsed. Its mirrored face cracked. It screamed, a real scream, ragged, low, trembling with something alien. Emotion. The Earthborn fleet fired. Crude projectiles, magnetic warheads, makeshift nukes. None of it would kill the thing. But it hurt it. And that's what mattered. Cade kept feeding the archive, pushing his memories into the void. He felt it push back. This pain, it burns. That's what makes it real, Cade hissed through clenched teeth. Why would you carry this? Cade bared his teeth. Because it's the only thing we've ever owned that no one could steal. The light grew brighter. The screams got louder. The creature's body began to break down, each layer of its imitation self peeling apart under the weight of emotion. Not just fear. Guilt. Regret. Love twisted into rage, things it had never known. Cade fell to his knees, his pulse dropped, blood streamed from his nose and ears, the console burned, the ship began to fall apart. Darren shouted behind him, Cade, we need to go! This ship can't take it! But Cade stayed on his knees, because something was happening. The figure wasn't just breaking, it was cracking open like a shell, and from the center of it, something small emerged. A spark. Not light, not matter, just remembrance. The core of the entity, the real one, had been watching itself through 1,000 civilizations, repeating the same cycle for eons. It hadn't been an executioner. It had been a slave to its own pattern, and Cade had broken the mirror. "You showed me death," the core whispered in his mind. Cade coughed blood, forcing himself to speak. "Number, I showed you life that won't forget death. There's a difference." The core flickered. Then it left. No sound, no flash, just absence. The mirrors vanished. The shape dissolved. The void withdrew into itself and disappeared. Cade collapsed. Silence fell. The Earthborn fleet floated above him. Fires flickered on half their hulls. Makeshift weapons melted or jammed. No celebration, no cheers, just breathing. And that was enough. Cade woke up 2 weeks later in a field hospital on a reclaimed Earthborn outpost. His right arm didn't work. His left eye was gone. His spine would never fully heal. But he was alive. Darren sat beside him, holding a datapad. "It's gone," he said. Cade nodded. "And?" Darren hesitated. "It left something. A data imprint. Not dangerous, just a shape. A name. They called it First Memory." Cade looked at the ceiling. The stars above were real again. "Then it understood." Darren looked over. "What now?" Cade turned his head, slowly, painfully. "Now we teach the galaxy what happens when you try to erase people who remember how to bleed." He sat up, one vertebra at a time. "I'm not done yet."